In this episode, I talk about, is your niche too narrow? Welcome to episode 102 of the Honest Entrepreneur Show, where I help creatives like you, yes you, to master your marketing. My name's Tom Ross, and let's get into the show. I don't know what that intro was, guys, for anyone watching the YouTube instead of listening to the podcast. I just did a ridiculous thing with my hands. I'm finding this on my other podcast, The Honest Designers Show. When you say something so many times, you start to bore yourself, and so you got to have fun with it. And on that show, I'm getting ridiculous and doing like silly voices. So who knows what to expect in the upcoming episodes of The Honest Entrepreneur Show. I'm probably just going to start acting like a bizarre child.
This question is from Carmela. Is it possible to niche down too much? I've already marketed myself as a letterpress printer, but I have two separate markets that I serve: engaged couples for wedding-related goods and business people for luxury business goods. I'm afraid that if I target only one of those markets, I'll be risking my business.
Hey Carmela, I'm so glad you asked this. I feel like this is a common objection to the whole niching philosophy. I actually did a post on my Instagram where I talked about people's objections, and this was definitely one of them. I did like a ask a question thing. I was like, what are your guys' problems with niching? Because a lot of you seem resistant to it. And then I did a piece of content addressing them head on. But yeah, the answer is yes, absolutely. Some niches are too small. If I said I was only going to serve beekeepers who made more than 7 figures a year, that would be a pretty narrow market. I don't know if any of those exist. Maybe there's one of them. I have no clue. That would be too narrow. So absolutely. The trick is, and I'm doing a triangle with my hands for anyone who's listening and not watching, you start wide. And wide is a shit place to be because it's too noisy. And then you go right down to a point at the bottom, which is too narrow most of the time. There's not enough abundance. But generally speaking, I'm a huge fan of going as far down that triangle as you can while still having a viable market. And the reason being is just niching works, right? It unlocks so much. It lets you focus your marketing efforts. It lets you focus your content. It lets you speak your consumer's language rather than talk to everyone. It lets you stand out. It lets you break through the noise. It massively decreases competition. There are just endless benefits to niching, and it's really empowering to actually be a thought leader or a market leader in your particular space. For example, I'll give you a good example. There are 1 billion creatives on Instagram and on the internet in general. There are 1 billion people giving out marketing advice, and fake bullshit entrepreneurs consist of a lot of those people. There are very, very few people that are actually putting out with credibility business advice for creatives. And I think that's why I'm able to break through. There's people like Chris Do. There's people like Michael Jander. I know most of the people, and I can count them on basically one hand, that are actually doing this. There's people that are putting out educational stuff and using like that slideshow format, but a lot of them are in the UI space, I've noticed. Not my market, right? So in terms of the people I'm competing with, I'm actually friends with most of them, and it doesn't feel overly competitive because there's a huge abundance. Because guess what? It is that client to designer or creative ratio. I talked about this in my content, right? How many clients are there to go around for each person that is serving them? And if I can think of like 5 people, including me, that are actually offering really solid marketing advice for creatives, but there are quite literally millions of creatives that need help with their marketing because most of them suck at it, then I think we're going to be fine. If we have a few million apiece, I think that's probably a big enough market for us. Yet it's, a relatively narrow niche in terms of like focusing down quite a lot. Yours is obviously a little bit different. So I think you said it was letterpress for businesses and for couples that have just got engaged. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the best way is to test it. As with all of the things that I talk about on this show, it's all about just seeing, is it viable? Are there enough people out there? So to start with, are there a lot of businesses? Fuck yeah. Are there a lot of people that are getting engaged and getting married? Absolutely. So that kind of says there's probably, quite a large market there. How many of them are going to want letterpressing? Well, that's a different question altogether. Maybe business people don't give a shit about that stuff, apart from a very, very small subsector of them that work for like fancy law offices and are willing to pay to get stuff embossed. But for everyone else, like my business, I don't really care. Like we're a startup. If our letterheads, I don't even think we have letterheads, but if our letterheads aren't embossed, I'm not going to lose much sleep. If anything, I'm trying to cut costs on that stuff to reduce our operating costs. So that's one example. But with our wedding stuff, I'm already like, I'm designing our save the dates, but my fiance is absolutely there being like, oh, can we get that like gold leafed and can we get that embossed? And I'm there trying to explain the printing costs behind this stuff. And she's really keen to make it happen. So maybe that's some indication there's a bigger market there. But ultimately, the best way is going to be to try things. And this is, I talk about this all the time. Nothing is fixed. Okay. In fact, I'm going to get my phone out. I literally put this out the other day because I just keep seeing this crop up as an issue. So it says, stop thinking your creative business choices are a life sentence. And it's because people get really scared to commit to things, including niching, because they think it's permanent. So I say in this post, realize no decision is permanent. Your creative business is an ever-evolving journey. Over the years, I've tried hundreds of projects, niches, and strategies. Many projects didn't last forever, but I committed to every one of them. Had I been frozen in indecision, nothing would have happened. I then go on to say, you can pivot anytime. You can stop anytime. You can do anything. So just stop overthinking and start doing. People felt like, in a positive way, really called out by this because I think we can all be guilty of it. The very fact that you're asking me this question means you're kind of stuck there being like, oh, I need some help. Like, I need some answers. Just start doing. I pivot all the freaking time. When I started this personal brand, I was trying to teach marketing and entrepreneurship to entrepreneurs. It was that broad, okay? So I started doing it. And then, you know what I found? I was like, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people who are teaching other entrepreneurs how to be entrepreneurs. This is kind of hard. You know what else I noticed? The content that does best is generally when I talk about stuff for creatives, because my early fledgling audience, a lot of them were creatives because they knew me from The Honest Designer Show and my company Design Cuts. So funny enough, the content for them specifically did better. So I looked at those two things and I thought, you know what? I'm going to niche down. So I'm going to keep teaching marketing advice, but just for creatives. And the more I've done that, the more I've taken off, which proves niching works. So that's an example. But over my life, I've had so many cases like that where I do it for a bit and then either I get bored, apathetic, I don't want to do it anymore, I see more potential over here, I pay attention to a part of that thing that's working, so I kind of follow that path. Like nothing is fixed. I might do this for years and years, and then I leverage that to go and teach actual entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship on a wider scale and not just creatives. So maybe I go the other way in 10 years' time, but I niche down to build credibility and a huge audience and get traction, and then I go broader to help more people. I don't freaking know what's going to happen. But the point is, if I kind of just got stuck there being like, oh, I don't know which one to pick and, what's going to work for me, then I wouldn't do anything. So just start doing, stop overthinking, figure it out as you go, but just keep perception and be aware of what's happening, what is working, what isn't, what's showing some potential, what isn't, and use that to adjust and be agile and just get shit done and get moving. I hope that helps. Question of the day. Do you know what your niche is? And can you put it into words? If you can, leave it in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I appreciate you guys so much. I'm really enjoying the YouTube show. If you are too, then be sure to hit the subscribe icon and tick the little bell to get notifications when I post new content on this platform.